Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Sapineri of SciMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigmont of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. Hey everybody, it's our 9th anniversary. That's right, we've been recording Command Control Power every week since June 2013. We hope you've enjoyed it. On this special occasion of 9 years running, we're trying a little experiment for the next month or 2. We have a great community of supporters on Patreon, and we really want to show them how much we appreciate their support. So this summer, we're airing new shows every week in the private patron-only subscription. Here on the public show, we'll re-air a classic episode from our catalog of almost 500 episodes, along with the occasional new show. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the weekly patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening. Jerry Zigmont, owner of New Canaan, Connecticut-based consultancy MacWorks, said it was nice, quote, nice to see Apple making some new hardware announcements. That's the quote they used, Jerry? Nice? You couldn't go into any more detail in this quote?
Yeah, my point was they're making an effort. It's nice to see that they're trying, but when they're constrained by all the factory closings, they get a gold star for effort. Well,
you did go on to say it's nice that they are marching forward with the supply chain issues and they're trying to keep on schedule. So, I mean, that's the big question is when can people actually order this stuff? I have a few clients who've ordered things recently. You know, as we speak, these announcements have just been made and this show will probably air a couple weeks later. So we'll see how this all shakes out. But as far as I know, the Macs that they announced are available next month. That would be July 2022. I have some clients that placed orders in the last couple of weeks for new MacBook Airs. She actually reached out to me and said, what should I do? Should I buy one of the new ones? And I said, yes, you should. And Apple usually reaches out and offers that option, you know, says, hey, we announced some new things. Do you want to swap up to that one? Here's the difference in price, whether it's more money or less money. I said, you know, they're not actually available yet. So I guess what you should do is cancel your order and then wait and see. So it's kind of a tricky time, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll know more about the supply chain issues.
How do you think they'll do that? Will it be just a quiet thing where just all of a sudden they'll be available for purchase and you got to scramble around? And if you catch the news at the end of the day, there's already a lead time on them. How do they normally do that?
There'll probably be an email that goes out. Yeah, it's a good question because they haven't really given any guidance as far as when they can be pre-ordered. In the past, it was products get announced today and then like next Friday, you can pre-order them or something.
Right. Yeah, Sam, you're Mr. Apple. What say you?
Well, this is what Tim told me. He said to wait for, no, just kidding. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that Joe brought up, which is the fact that they didn't specify any dates like they normally do. And I know you mentioned in your famous interview, Jerry, about having them in time for back to school, which would be ideal, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, we got people graduating from high school, people going into college. This is a hot time for portables, especially the more affordable MacBook Air. That's terrific, super powerful.
This is the question for me, too, is like, do I want to trade up, so to speak, to a MacBook Air M2 version? Because the new design looks really cool. It looks like a better display, and there's a few little benefits. The issue that comes to mind is, will performance suffer when it's trying to shed some excess heat and it doesn't have a fan? The only variable it can control is like we can throttle the processor. And specifically, Apple did call attention to the fact that with the MacBook Pro 13-inch, which they also just announced, the point was that it can sustain performance. So it has the same M2 chip, but because it has a fan, it can sustain performance. So I don't want to step down to like a machine that's going to randomly start throttling, you know, when I'm multitasking heavily in the MacBook Air. I kind of need to see how this works in practice. So I need one of you guys to buy it first and let me know how it goes.
From personal experience of having a MacBook Pro for a really long time and then trying that piece of garbage 2020 MacBook Air,
I know.
I'm never going back. So you won't see me testing that for you.
It's so different, though. That's the thing between Intel and Apple Silicon is like, Intel just generates so much heat. Plus, that model, the old MacBook Airs, had fans, and they still couldn't avoid thermal throttling. Yeah, that was a really bad misstep. Again, I'll just point out, I kind of am surprised that there isn't a MacBook Air Intel Air Gate. I don't know what it would be called, but like some big to-do about those models, because you had that experience. Ashley's had that experience. I know several clients who've complained about the same issue where it's like, man, this thing is just lagging. Like the cursor is jumping across the screen, and that should not happen. But it affected like at least 2019 and 2020, if not maybe also the 2018 MacBook Air. So I think we should hear more about that, honestly. So there are some other new things. I was really excited to see them finally like giving messages some attention. So I'm looking forward to being able to mark as unread, which is really great, because it's the worst thing is when you like click on a message and you've got to like remember to go back to it later, and so mark as unread is great. We've all been looking forward to that, but I didn't expect them to also release undelete, which my wife says is going to be a great new feature. Or sorry, not undelete, unsend. Delete, right? Yeah. And editing a message, even better for those Siri mistakes. Although, Jerry, I don't think you'll probably be editing a lot of your text, even though you're probably the biggest Siri user that I know.
So how does that work?
Yeah, as he's careening down the highway.
Right. There's a lot of messages from Jerry says, I'm careening down the highway at 70.
So please excuse my typos.
Right.
But how does that work? Recalling the message or recalling the mail. I mean, I know in theory how it could work, but how's Apple pulling that magic off?
Well, I mean, the thing that they showed when a message was edited, it says delivered. We all know we've seen that delivered, and it can say read if the person's read it. Another little tag is it'll say edited. So it's nice to know that the message has been edited. Yeah, I don't know. Will there be a time limit? I mean, I imagine like you can't go back and edit a message from a week ago. Maybe you can. I don't know.
If you look at Slack, for instance, you can delete a message as long as the channel allows for it for, I don't know, I've done it like much, much later. So I don't know if there's an actual time limit, but I think one of the points that you guys might be making also is like the person could still get the notification and see it. So if you made a big oopsie, they might still see that it went there. It's just gone now. That happened to me actually in Slack one time. So I know from experience that that's not a fun thing to happen to you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. To your point, notifications won't be edited. So it could still be like sitting there waiting for someone to see it. Or for that matter, you can have notifications for Slack, to your point, show up in your email. So that's just a static email sitting there, with the original typos or whatever in place.
Yeah, the first thing I thought of when I saw all those mail changes was how SmallCube, the makers of the Mail Suite, which has mail tags and mail act on, they've been a little bit Sherlock.
Another thing that got Sherlocked were those pay later platforms like you see on all these different websites. In fact, I heard a interesting podcast about those recently. I forget, it might have been Planet Money or one of those, but they did like a little bit of, I don't know if you'd call it an expose exactly, but basically that the reason you see all of these pay later, like pay in installments, kind of thing on various websites is because they close the sale really effectively. People look at the total in their shopping cart and they're like $300, can't really afford that right now. And they just close the tab, but if you see pay later and you can pay $80 something or whatever it is, in 4 easy payments with no interest, yeah, $80, that sounds more reasonable, and then you just have to budget yourself manually, because what happens to people is you do a few of those and suddenly you've got these like balloon payments, into the next month, and you could blow your budget very easily. So there was kind of a interesting take on that. It's not the nicest thing Apple's come out with. It seems like it benefits retailers and does not benefit the consumer very much, even though it looks like it does. It seems like it gets a lot of people into trouble with those services.
Kids like you, Joe, like the pay later thing, but older people like Sam and I. How do you like that, Sam, the way I kind of worked you into the older crowd?
Yeah, I don't know how I got into there. All right.
We're more, I don't want to say we're more fiscally responsible, but we're less prone to pay later. We look at what's in our account, and if we can't afford it, we don't buy it.
Right.
But I know how you kids roll, so.
The other way I look at it is like if you can manage your finances that way, it's like free money, so to speak, because you do get more time to pay it off and you can put it on a credit card, which also gives you a grace period usually. So, essentially you're taking advantage of 0% interest for a very short time. So you can make it work in your favor, but you have to be really careful about all these deals you're signing up for, obviously.
We never mention on the show, but it's pretty fantastic that Apple offers 0% APR financing on any of their stuff. So I added a 1 terabyte drive to the new M2 MacBook Air and 16 gigs of RAM, and I think the price was $152 a month. If it's not costing you and you're using their money and their computer while you do it over time, why not?
It's kind of another way to budget. You could budget for what's my current Apple hardware monthly budget, subscribing, so to speak, to like an iPhone with the iPhone upgrade program. Same idea there. You're just always on the hook for that money every month, but you avoid having to lay it out up front.
So Sam, do you generally finance any of your equipment that you use for your business, or is most of it paid in full and then you just do the tax write-off and move on?
Even though those services are there, and that does sound appealing that I don't have interest to pay every month, I'm the type of person that just likes it out of my way relatively quickly, so I don't see those numbers happen every single month, the exception being probably iPhone. But for everything else, the more expensive items, I guess, I want them just done. I don't want to see $100 a month. I don't want to see this because it just gives me anxiety. So I'd rather just put it away.
Just get it off your plate.
Yeah, that's it.
Circling back to messages, I would have liked to see more tapbacks. I don't know if this has ever occurred to you guys, but like there's certain messages where I think a facepalm tapback would be really good. Like the little, instead of putting a thumbs up or thumbs down, like a facepalm.
Right. You mean with your clients?
Yeah, clients or talking about clients among my team, or I think they could introduce a few new tapbacks that could be kind of interesting.
Or customizable. Why aren't those there?
Yeah, exactly. Put any emoji on a message.
Yeah, that would be cool actually to customize that. That's a great idea.
Somehow, if you could do it graphically, you could get your logo with a thumbs up. So anytime a client says, that sounds great, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 8, you could send them a customized emoji.
That's interesting. What about the memojis? I was playing with those recently. That would be kind of cool, like to have your logo, like have your memoji, with like a little logo on it, like you're describing, and then with a thumbs up or something. That'd be very cool.
With your customizable memoji, Joe, that I only recently learned, but that was talked about in earlier WWDC, and someone had recently told me about it. So I customized, I think I sent it to you guys. I'd customized mine. It's not done within the Messages app, of course. So I did it outside of there, but now I have my memoji on a computer with my company logo on as a sticker on the computer, and it kind of on my Zoom conferences when I have my camera off, it gives me a little, advertising power, I guess you could say. But I would like some kind of built-in ability to do stuff like that as well, so you can make it easier on yourself.
Text in general, and I know that you guys aren't using it heavily or at all with your clients, but I think that's going to be more the standard. I've been an advocate of it, being able to text to using a business number, obviously not your personal number, but having a business text number available has been a real asset at times, just for quick little answers, or to, you're on the highway and you need to get a message, and you always have that. Like I say, I'm careening down the highway at 70 miles an hour. You may not have time to draft up an email to your client. But through CarPlay, you could, in theory, RingCentral app is supposed to work with CarPlay. P.S. It doesn't. But when that works sometime in the future, you'd be able to use that business number and just text a client and say, I'm going to be there 10 minutes late. It can be effective.
Well, have you looked into that, Jerry? I actually want to talk a little bit about ticketing and just how we communicate with clients. But on the topic of Apple Business Chat, that is a feature. And I've had some interaction with it recently with, for example, I booked some flights. As you know, I traveled recently and I was trying to use points to pay for 2 flights and on JetBlue. And so I think I clicked on something and it said Apple user, question mark, like, try chatting with us. So you just click on the thing, it takes you over to iMessage. And, you send them a message, hey, I'm trying to book a flight. In this case, they replied back, the wait is going to be longer than 2 hours. Like, we'll let you know when we're ready. Are you able to wait? And it's like this automated thing. And I was like, sure. And this was like 10 p.m. or something. I'm like, I'm probably not going to see this. But in one case, I woke up the next morning. It was early enough where I guess they eventually had come back to me and it was still like it had not expired. So it was like 6 a.m. the next day. And I like wrote them back and sure enough, like got somebody live through iMessage. So it was actually really, really convenient. I remember we spoke with a colleague who had set this up. I'm trying to remember who this was. I think it might have been John Brown. But does anyone out there have any experience with this? And Jerry, have you looked into it? Because you're all about the chat. I'm surprised that MacWorks has not signed up for Apple Business Chat yet.
It may be a viable thing. It's just a question of how many things are you going to sign up for? I mean, there's so much going on. I got some chat. It works. It doesn't work with CarPlay, but it works in general, the Ring Central. And that's what I'm using to do my business phone. It's semantics here. I'm saying chat and I'm using that interchangeably with SMS. So yeah, what I'm speaking of specifically is SMS through the Ring Central app, and that's worked effectively for me. And I just don't know why I would benefit from adding another layer to that or in another extraction of that with the Apple Business Chat.
It would let people reach you in iMessage and the bubbles would be gray instead of green, I guess. Like, I don't really think there is a strong benefit to your point in your case. But for me, with Ring Central, as far as I know, there's no way to share that with other people on your team. So like I can have my own extension and Tim can have his own extension. But in order for us to like have the same, chat or texting, like SMS, conversation history and all that, we would need to sign into the same extension. We need to share an extension essentially. So that just doesn't work for us the way we work. And for that reason, I really don't use it because I don't want, myself to be kind of like a dead end where clients just like start texting me and then I have to be on top of it. That's why I have a team. So that's one reason that I was interested in this Apple Business Chat. I'm not sure if there's any other advantages, so I'd be curious if anyone has set it up, if how it's working for them. And I'm not looking to set the bar higher for clients to communicate, but also I don't want it to be too low, like where people just send the most poorly formed questions through chat. Whereas at least with an email, in some cases they'll maybe they'll include a screenshot or maybe that's old fashioned because I do have clients that seem to reach out by text as their preferred method, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the request is worse or something or more frivolous. But
I have a question for you guys regarding this, because as a customer might be used to texting in one way versus like what I prefer, which is a ticket or an email and something like that. Is it that they then also kind of expect a more immediate response, and then you can set yourself up for failure if you're busy and you don't respond within like an hour? They're like, what's the point of me texting you if I can't get a fast response?
Right, exactly. I mean, my friends often wait days or weeks to get a response by text, and like
I know.
As a friend, we know.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Yeah, to your point, that's kind of tough, Sam. Like, do people have different expectations? I think a lot of clients probably would.
It has been my experience that is not the case. Okay. And if someone has that expectation, you need to give them an attitude adjustment in a nice way, of course. It's been a win for me. It's been so handy. It's beneficial to me. When it ceases being a benefit for me, I'll stop doing it. But until that time, I'm going to proceed. It's not like I stand on our third floor and yell it out the window that, hey, we've got texting, but it does happen. And it's just more efficient for me a lot of times. I don't have any other infrastructure other than me to deal with the problems.
That's true. That's a little different. But just to be clear, your third floor is not the top floor, right? How many stories do you have in the castle?
Do we count the turrets at the top as another floor, or the Widow's Walk? You walk around and you can see all 4 points.
Do you have like a Rapunzel-like tower as well?
That's what happened to my hair. I used to have long hair like that, and I had to cut it off because too many people were climbing up it. All right, circling back to SmallCube, the makers of mail tags. So they have this feature built in, this send later, which Sam and I use religiously. Inevitably, I will have messages queued up to send later, and this happened on Sunday night, and I wanted them to go out Monday morning, and they were in the outbox. I restart my MacBook Air, my lovely MacBook Air M1 with only 8 gigs of RAM every 24 hours because I seem to get better performance for it. So I have an automatic restart every morning. I log into my computer on Monday morning and all the messages are gone. All 4 messages are gone. And some of it was invoicing. There was one email that I haven't accounted for, but they're not in the outbox. They're not in the drafts. There's no example that they have been sent out. And this has happened in the past. And I'm just so ticked off. So I'm so happy to see that Apple's going to be rolling this out and I've opened up tickets with them and they want me to help them fix their product. It's so ridiculous and it's the worst thing in the world. I don't know how you guys are, but it's great if you could remember every single email you had queued up to go out the door. But when you wake up the next day and you've got other things and you're thinking about your schedule and to find that they haven't gone out, you've got to reconstruct them in many cases, figure out what you wrote. In this one particular instance, I couldn't figure out where one of the emails went. Who was one of the recipients. Right. So one remains unaccounted for and the other 3 I redid. It just is a real frustrating thing for me. So happy Sherlock Day, small cube.
Yeah, nice.
That's messed up. I have not had that experience happen to me once, but I know, Jerry, that you've talked about that before. So that's actually incredibly scary to think about, especially given how important an email might be that you have queued up to go out. So I'm surprised even like the Exchange doesn't save a draft or anything. It's just kind of kooky, if you ask me.
It is kooky. It is indeed kooky. I don't know what happens to it. I think the mail is handled differently when it sort of sits in the outbox. And it may have something to do with the fact that it is Exchange, but who the hell knows? The thing about Small Cubed was they have a renewable license. If you don't do anything with your computer, you could continue to use the product. But they did add a few features. And, it's like that recurring revenue stream that a lot of businesses have. But what I had to do most recently was I think I had to do a restore in this computer. And for me to reactivate the license, I couldn't do it. I had to pony up the extra money for the upgrade so I could reactivate it. So I had just given them some upgrade money for their latest version of the Mail Suite 2021. No correlation between the two, but and I opened up a ticket with them, and it's been radio silence for like 3 days. So we're pretty much done here. I'm going to still use it, but I'm going to take screenshots of everything that I want to do a send later with until we get the new operating system from Apple.
Safe bet to screenshot or maybe copy paste into another app just to have easy access to copy paste it back in if that happens again.
That's kind of the worst, though, like having to remember that and just always having this like feeling in the back of your mind, like, did I lose a message and not notice it? That's not the way it should work. And I've had similar experience with it, so I stopped using that as well a while back, basically for that reason.
So interestingly about this scary deletion stuff and things that might disappear, there was a recent TidBITS Content Network article about iCloud Drive shared folders. I don't know if you guys saw this, but how when you're collaborating on shared folders, how items would be destroyed instantaneously and not put in trash or be recoverable in any way through a recently deleted folder. They were talking about how horrible this setup is, and it was confirmed that this is a behavior in using iCloud shared folders. So I don't think that's improved since the article came out because it was just a couple of weeks ago, but I thought that very concerning. We might be push people to start to use the built-in Apple features more and collaborate using those tools instead of like a Dropbox or something. But if you see something like that, there's no way I could recommend that.
That's crazy. Wouldn't a better policy be like that they would keep it in the owner's trash? Like the owner, the person who created the file originally, like would have that ability. That's a crazy design spec. That's very strange. I'll have to stay on top of those a little bit more. I'm always like a little bit behind on reading the TidBITS newsletters, but I'm really eager to read the information about this latest round of releases because that's always just a great way to communicate with our clients, as I always say. But that's a huge tip from them to keep that in mind, that if you start using the shared files, for collaboration, don't delete them because they're gone instantly. I guess you need to rely on Backblaze and Time Machine in that case.
The other thing in the article that they were talking about is that they said, and I haven't looked at it to confirm it, but that Apple recently tweaked, as I say, their already weak documentation in a way that further conceals this information. So like it looks like they know about it and they're like trying to brush it under the rug in a way. It's totally scary, man.
That's weird. Wow.
Do you think in these sensitive times it would be acceptable to do, if you were a consultant and you embrace the Apple services, to do Apple services shaming on Slack?
Is that a channel on Slack?
It should be. Just what we've talked about here, there's so many reasons why that's not ready for your business clients. And this is another perfect example.
Well, they've gotten a lot of flack over services in general, in the past, although I don't think of them that way anymore. Like as far as reliability of syncing and stuff like that, in the days of like MobileMe or early iCloud, I did not really respect it as much. But, these days I don't troubleshoot a lot of iCloud issues, as far as like syncing photos or calendars. So that's been pretty good, but that's just an interesting design spec that they would say, like, if you're, sharing files that they would be deleted instantly, as opposed to putting them in that recoverable for 30 days recently deleted section. On the topic of new things, one other thing they did release that I thought, or they did announce anyway, that I thought would be really good for clients is iCloud shared photo library. So not just shared albums, but sharing your entire photo library with family members. And I think that's a really nice feature.
Finally, I mean, this is something that my wife has insisted on for a long time. She's like, why can't we do this? Like, she looks at me and says, you got to have a way to do this. Come on, make it happen. And I'm like, well, no, I can't. But a lot of families and people that share that history of photos wanted this for a long time. I'd say that's a huge one, even almost bigger than the messages thing that everyone loved.
Did you notice that when they did present that material in the keynote that they mentioned twice that people would have full editing privileges, including deletion?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean,
yep. So, you got to be careful. So you're sharing it out. But now all of a sudden, some of the photos, well, I didn't want those anymore. Or some lovely photos, with my kids or my family. And it's like, where are the photos? My ninth grader going like, oh, I didn't want those on my phone anymore. Are you kidding me?
That's a great point, because you do have to tell clients that, when you set them up with iCloud photos in general, that, deletions sync across devices in case they were in the habit of like deleting them manually from their iPhone to free up space or something, And of course, Apple's, it prompts like do point that out, but you kind of want to also tell people. But that's interesting that Apple did mention it, specifically in the keynote, just to kind of like already plant that seed.
Twice.
Yeah, but maybe, there is the recently deleted in photos. So I'm hoping that like if someone deletes a photo that I took, from that shared photo library, that it would go in recently deleted and I could get it back from there at least. But you have to notice it's been deleted. Are we supposed to go into that recently deleted on a regular basis if we start sharing our libraries? I mean, it probably needs some kind of interface, like at least a badge on recently deleted that's noticeable, or
like an
something.
Ominous message when you go to delete it.
Yeah, but also like I want to be notified, to your point, if someone deletes a photo from the shared library and it's going to delete from mine, but it was a photo that I want to keep, it seems like that should be called attention to, like on my side if they delete it, put a little badge on the recently deleted folder, or I don't know, even better, send an email or something like that. Well, just rounding out, one last thing that I thought was pretty interesting was Stage Manager, which is a new way of managing Windows. I mean, that's a pretty big thing, to come to the Mac after all these years, of just like overlapping windows and whatever shape and size you want. And, just usually people get buried in Windows. I found it very interesting because Federico Vitici, who's known as kind of like the iPad guy, he was like very early to switch to iPad and basically abandon the Mac. Figuring out, how to do all of his workflow on the iPad. He recently, for the last 6 months or so, was using the Mac again, was giving the Mac another chance because of the Apple Silicon machines and how, just how great they are. One of his few remaining sort of gripes about the Mac was like managing windows. Like, why do I have to work so hard, find the window that I was working on or resize things so that they're sensible? Why am I manually like moving things around? And he created these different workflows to kind of manage the windows for him using third-party apps. But Stage Manager essentially puts like what you're working on front and center. You can also have a couple of things that are active as part of a group, And the other windows that are like open but not, being actively used kind of go off to the side, and it just handles that for you. And it looks like it's doing a really sensible job of that. So I'm looking forward to that actually in Mac OS. And that's also part of iPad OS, finally giving the iPad more of a distinction from the iPhone to be able to run multiple apps, simultaneously, more than just the two that you can run in split view. So iPad OS is also getting this stage manager. So I thought that was pretty neat.
That was interesting. And also, I wanted to get your impression, both you and Sam, towards the end of the keynote. They had that iPad in landscape mode and they hooked it up to the external monitor. And I was like, hey, wait a minute. And they were trying to do like Mackie things with it, with the windows like you were talking about. Do you think this was a foreshadowing of things to come in the future? Because it sure seemed like they were shoehorning that iPad to be like a Mac with an external monitor.
Yeah, it was a really interesting demo. I had kind of the same thoughts from it. That looks like a Mac. For all intents and purposes, this is kind of like looking like a Mac now. And as far as like the hardware goes, an iPad can have built-in cellular. That's something the Mac doesn't have as of now. And it's using the same processors. Why couldn't it run Mac OS? It obviously could. I'm sure Apple has that kind of device in operation. Would that be beneficial to be able to have Mac OS running on an iPad that, has its own keyboard and mouse and all? Or, are they like literally converging where there's no real distinction between iPad OS and Mac OS, but like with iPad OS, you can essentially accomplish all the same things that you want to do on the Mac, and it works and functions like a Mac and maybe even runs Mac apps, just like, the Mac can now run iOS apps. Because it's the same processor architecture. So yeah, it's definitely getting the gears turning on all of that stuff. And it's hard to foresee how that would work, but it looks like they're almost all the way there. I mean, the iPad looks like a Mac.
They seem to dip their toes in the water of this merging of the two systems at times, where like Windows went all in, for instance, with the Surface and their product line. It seems like Apple periodically just kind of pokes at it and says, maybe we'll give this a try. And what Jerry was saying kind of rings true to that, is like, hey, maybe this looks good. Maybe we'll get some chatter on this and see where it looks like. But I would be certainly interested to see that come together in a larger way where you can, combine that functionality of both platforms.
It was interesting they left it in, because I'm sure there was stuff they cut out, but they happened to leave that in. I don't pay very much attention when they get to the games portion. I mean, in the sports, for the most part, I tune all that out. That gentleman came out, he was Asian and they had subtitles. He presented his game. The graphics on the game were so compelling. I couldn't stop watching it. It was fantastic.
I saw that part too. That was insane. I mean, and he seemed very impressed, as the game designer, what the hardware could do. But yeah, I certainly found that very interesting. Also, not being much of a gamer myself, and also taking the opportunity when they start to talk about Game Center and things to, have like a bio break from the 2-hour-long presentation. But coming back and seeing that demo, I was just blown away. Like this is where games are now. This is why people think we're already living in a simulation. Because games are advancing so quickly that. Anyway, I won't give you the whole Elon Musk argument about that, but it's pretty interesting. I think it's Nick Bostrom who is the guy who originally formulated the whole thought experiment about it, and Elon Musk just popularized it.
Elon Musk told everybody, working from home
to pretend to work somewhere else.
Yeah,
yeah.
He's such a I don't know if we could say this on on the airwaves, but he's a poster. He's just like a guy who wants to say something that's going to get attention and doesn't really care. He's sort of like the Trump of tech.
So bringing it back to texting and communicating with clients, whether you use TeamViewer, Splashtop, or the texting app in Adigy, have you ever done that thing where you're looking at the client's screen so they know that you're communicating with them, but you haven't established a phone call? So you just text them a message and this box will pop up on their screen, and then watch them how they get completely baffled and puzzled and they don't know how to respond. Have you ever seen this? This happens to me all the time.
Does it happen to you a lot? I have seen it, yeah. But go ahead.
My gosh, yeah. Where I'll say like, hey Debbie, let's start a session now. I'll be calling you. What's the best number to reach you? Like you can see the mouse moving around and you could smell the smoke from the other end of the phone. And they don't know where to type, what to do. they're just completely bamboozled. And you think about that and you like think like, what, is that the way they just like normally go about their business? Is this like how they interact with a computer on a daily basis? Because you would think, based on what we do, that those sorts of things are kind of like learned behavior, especially, responding to other messages in a text box. It's not that hard, people. I'm baffled sometimes.
Yeah. Right, because if there's like no interface, it says like type something here. It's like
Right.
they're supposed to just know how it functions, which like by now, doesn't everybody understand how that works? But yeah, that's clients. They'll get confused about the easiest thing sometimes. I mean, who can blame them? They got a lot going on, I guess.
Or you have a scheduled session, right? And so you log in because you've got Adigy and you already have access. And you could see they're doing something. They've forgotten about the appointment, even though they've gotten 50 million reminders. So I really quickly sometimes will go to the Notes app and open it up really quickly. And I want to type, "Hi, it's Jerry, I'm here." And they're fighting you. So you're trying to open up the Notes app and they're like, the window opens and they close it down.
Right.
Has this happened to you guys?
Oh my God.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh,
All kinds of things like that where I'm fighting for control. Yes.
The time that you actually do establish a session and you've been working on it for a couple minutes and all of a sudden they like want to check their email. They just start like opening up mail. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm working.
All right.
Yeah, especially if like mail, something's happening in the background and you don't want them to open a certain app, and it's just, you're like messing me up now. Now you're like messing up your system by clicking on stuff. Just, can't you take a walk around the block or something?
Or you're working with them remotely. They're watching you and you want them to be part of the session. And then you start to say like, okay, so what we'll do is we'll move this item over here, and they'll start to do it. And then you'll go like, go ahead. You could do that. And then you have to say like, okay, I'm going to take control now again. Okay, so, and then the other times where you have to say to them, are you pressing any buttons at all? Or are your hands on the trackpad or on the mouse right now?
Right.
And they were. And they're like, no, I wasn't touching anything.
Right.
Well, it's very mysterious how I don't say this, but it's like very mysterious how everything starts to work again as soon as
you mention it. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Or it's scheduled. You're scheduled to work on the system, and you get them on the phone, and you get connected, and then you don't really need them, but so you can hang up while you get the work done. And they're like, "Can I use my computer while you're doing this?" It's like, no. Do you see what's happening on screen? Like, how can we both use your computer? What does that even mean?
That's interesting because I don't get that very much. I recently worked with a client. She was one that I mentioned on the show months ago, where she says things like, I do everything that you tell me to do because then I know I'm all set with my technology. It's like, oh gosh, you just do what you need to do because I know when you're done, I'm going to be okay.
Right. It's kind of nice to hear. I have clients like that too, but I'm like, well,
like, we would prefer you to take ownership over what you do and not be so reliant on me taking care of you.
Right.
Adding to the frustrations of dealing with clients, and I think Joe had a similar story about this recently, so it just kind of bugged me that I saw this. We had one of those situations where someone said they had something on their screen, like a message that wouldn't go away. And this was the owner of a company, right? And he has his assistant reach out to us, and he's like, he's very frustrated that this is happening, and he's tried restarting a number of times. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, as Joe saw before, a restart would get rid of this message, right? So we know this joker has not restarted the computer. And second of all, I just went into the MDM and I show a last restart of 30 days ago. Right. And so I'm like, nice. But the question, yeah, exactly. But the question is, how do you word that to them without being a total a-hole, right? Like you could be like, okay, well, we investigated and he is in fact lying to us and he did not restart his computer. Or do you be like, well, sometimes people think they restart, but they actually didn't. Right. And this guy's kind of a, I don't know. I don't like him that much. So I'm thinking of taking a harder line. Right. So we kind of went in between and was just like, well, it appears from our records that he didn't restart. So why don't you have him give it another try? And of course, we hear nothing from him after that. So I'm assuming that he did. And he just got caught in his lie.
Yeah, I know the type, the guy you're talking about, where you're not going to hear back because exactly what you told him to do did work, and he was dead wrong, about like getting frustrated and claiming that he tried that already or whatever. It's like totally his bad, but he's not going to say that, Yeah, that's an interesting thing because as you put it, like you're going to try to say, well, it appears from our monitoring system or like from our records seem to show it's like you're trying to help them save face because like we're the professionals and the service providers, and you don't want them to like necessarily press them on it, so you're kind of like letting them save face. But if you're too careful about it, you're not clear enough in it, so like if you're saying it seems this or that, then they might come back and be like, what do you mean it seems that that's the case? Like, you don't know if I've restarted, or you don't, it's like you don't want to make it sound too like hedged in that kind of language. It's hard to word it without doing that. Like it's hard, without it sounding the opposite, like you're insisting that they're totally dead wrong.
You know what I do? I just go into Adigy and restart the machine. Boom.
Right.
Just, doesn't matter if he's on a Zoom conference. Yeah. It's just, we're restarting now. See ya.
Oh, you said you restarted, right? Well, how do you like this restart?
How do you like them apples?
Yeah. Oh, it finally restarted from when you said it to restart earlier. That's what must have happened,
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined about